Race fans, are you getting fed up of the increasingly complicated Formula 1 video games we get these days? Do you yearn for the era of pixelated graphics and arcade machine style gameplay? Are you longing for a game based on the fourth most successful Japanese driver in Formula 1 history? Then look no further! Aguri Suzuki F1 Super Driving is your high-octane ticket to the 1992 Formula 1 season. Race flat out alongside some of the real-life drivers around the most iconic racing circuits in the world, like Monaco and Kyalami, as you stake your claim for the 1992 World Championship. And don't forget the big man himself! Aguri Suzuki occasionally features within this game, which has his name and face all over it. Can you beat the legend who once finished on the podium at his home race in Suzuka in a one-on-one challenge? Wow! Aguri Suzuki F1 Super Driving! Available for Super Nintendo from all good retailers in the past. Aguri Suzuki F1 Super Driving is a licensed trademark of someone or other. For full terms and conditions, please visit our non-existent website. If you're a lawyer looking to sue the creator of this fake advert, please be advised that nobody cares. Wow, that professional and well-made advertising campaign has certainly convinced me to buy it. And here it is. Aguri Suzuki F1 Super Driving in, mint condition. It originally came out in Japan in July 1992, but Aguri fans in Europe and North America would have to wait until the following year to get their hands on this highly anticipated title. I've jumped straight into the championship mode here because, to be honest, it's one of only two modes you get. Unless you count practice as a game mode, in which case there's three, which you shouldn't because it isn't. Strictly speaking, there is a two-player mode as well, but there isn't anyone here to play it with, so we'll have to pretend it doesn't exist. Anyway, as the totally genuine advert said, it's based on the 1992 season, much like Nigel Mansell's World Championship Racing, which I've covered on this channel before. It seems the early 90s was a popular time for F1 drivers releasing their own games. It's a shame it doesn't happen these days. Personally, I'd love to try out Antonio Giovinazzi's Super Duper F1 Racer Turbo Edition. In the Mansell game you were competing as the moaning moustache himself, but in this you're not actually driving as Aguri. You get to put your own name in and then pick from three cars that aren't licensed but are quite obviously the Williams, Ferrari and McLaren. Three teams Aguri never once drove for in his career. I don't know who Lozka are, but they seem to have a monopoly on F1 sponsorship in this game. I've gone for the Williams for this championship, in case you can't tell. While I've been rabbiting away, you've seen me race around Kyalami and Mexico City so far, where I've been fairly indifferent. 2 points from 2 races. Could have been worse, I suppose. In each round of the championship you have to qualify. As far as I can tell there's no way of skipping it. 1 warm-up lap and then 1 time lap. Across the line, and that run was okay I guess, and I'll be starting the Brazilian Grand Prix in 5th. My best grid position so far. So as the camera moves into position and our car magically pops into existence, the race will get underway. Well, it will in a moment. Wait for it, wait for it. There we go, and it's a typical crap start for me on this game. No matter what I do, I seem to lose about 6 places before the first corner. It doesn't take long to get them back though, and by the end of lap 1 I'm somehow in the lead. In fact, judging by the minimap, I'm miles ahead. Blimey, that's quite a meteoric turnaround from the first 2 races. And it's mostly because this game has an interesting feature, where you get to improve your car throughout the course of the season. There's a handful of different changes you can make, such as upgrading the engine or improving the, SP gas. That must be swapping diesel for unleaded or something. You can also fiddle about with your suspension and steering and that type of thing, but I don't know what I'm doing with any of that. I'm only interested in racing them, otherwise I'd have bought Bono Simulator 2021. Improving the car is quite a cool feature for a 28-year-old game though. It's only just been brought back in the most recent Codemasters F1 games, so Aguri was really onto something there. I made those changes just before Interlagos, and if we jump back into the race we're just in time to see me take a commanding victory. Wow, I absolutely bossed that. My fastest lap smashed Mansell's real-life pole time from 1992 by almost 5 seconds. It's going to be a similar story at the next race in Barcelona. I may have buffed the car up too much, the game's far too easy now. Forget F1 2020, get the esports community into this. I could turn pro. While you watch me dominate, I may as well talk a little bit about the gameplay. The control is very arcadey, a bit like the Mansell game, but I found it a lot easier to get the hang of. It's typical for the Super Nintendo racing games I played though, in the days before 3D was invented. That's not to say I've completely nailed the handling, as I've still had the occasional crash. One of the biggest criticisms I had of the Mansell game was the boring graphics, in that the tracks look like they've been dropped in the middle of a barren field. Now Aguri's game isn't exactly a massive step up from that, but there is a little bit more colour and detail to it. For the early 90s, I guess it isn't too bad. Coming towards the final laps of this race, and I've got another big lead, but the tyres have pretty much dropped off the cliff, as you can tell from the grip meter. I didn't know Pirelli were around that long ago. Oh dear, I've fallen off the track. There is a noticeable effect to grip as the race goes on, especially if you've decided to ignore the pits each lap like I did here. You have to be more careful, otherwise you'll be spinning at pretty much every corner. Again though, tyre performance is a nice feature for this era. Despite that momentary hiccup in my driving talent, I've won the race comfortably, and I think it's safe to assume that, if I could be bothered to complete the whole season, I would be world champion, so we'll call it off now. Move the FIA prize giving forward to May and get it over with. Thanks to the fans and the sponsors, especially Lozka, I've got an amazing team, etc, etc, cheers for the trophy, good night. Before we wrap up the video though, there's one more game mode on here, as I mentioned earlier. It's the versus Aguri thing, where you get to compete against the Japanese legend himself. In fact, this is the only part of the game he seems to appear. I wasn't racing against him in the championship. Weirdly his teammate was there, but not Aguri. How odd is that? It's his game and he's barely in it. Anyway, he is in this bit, and as you'd expect, you're racing him one-on-one at any track from the 92 season. The first one I'm doing is Monaco, despite the lack of buildings and barriers, and it's just a 3-lap shootout to finish in front of him. There's not much to say really, it's the same as the other races but with fewer other cars on the track. I managed to beat him, and to show his defeat you get to see a picture of a sad Aguri. Nyaww. Interestingly, alongside all the regular circuits that featured in the 1992 season, they've also made a few up. This one is the Russian Grand Prix, apparently, and it's a tricky little number. They should probably build this one, it looks a lot more exciting than Sochi. I mean, it can't be much worse. There's also an oval, and this random American Grand Prix track. It's another one they made up, I think. It doesn't look familiar to me anyway, but who knows, maybe it does exist. Let me know if you recognise it. So there you go, that's pretty much everything Aguri Suzuki F1 Super Driving has to offer. And to be honest, I'm quite impressed. I really enjoyed playing it and it was very easy to get a hang of. It could have done with a bit more Aguri in it, but overall, not too bad. It's certainly the best F1 game based on a Japanese driver who's been on the podium that I've ever played.